If I haven't done so yet, I want to introduce you to one of my favorite organizations in the church. They are like Leading Saints, an independent advocate of the church, but they focus on a different topic entirely, and that is being LGBT in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And how do we minister to LGBT saints and every question that may come up in that realm. And I talk with the current president of North Star, which is Jenn Curtis, and you're going to love her. She's wonderful. I've known her for years, as I've had opportunity to serve on the board of North Star and just support their yearly conference. I've been a keynote at their conference and taught breakout sessions, and I just love this organization so much. And if you're not familiar with them, I really encourage you to get more familiar with them. And if you are already familiar, I encourage you to join us in February. At the end of February, they're having their annual conference, and this is really a pivotal experience for a church leader to attend, in my opinion. And not just once, but attend every year. And there's additional resources and knowledge, and just the community in general is just so beautiful. I love it so much, attending every year. So I can't recommend it enough. We will link to that at northstarsaints.org to get you all the information. Make sure you know where to attend. And there's a special church leader track as well that I often get to participate in. And I would love to meet you in person if you have opportunity to attend. Now, in this conversation, we talk about North Star, but we also just talk about the issues surrounding being a LGBT Latter-day Saint or being a parent to LGBT individuals, the tough questions, the tough conversations, the just how do we minister and begin to help welcome these individuals into our pews and help them feel part of a ward. And we get into the really tough questions of, there's a lot of resources out there for LGBT Latter-day Saints. Like, are some better than others, or should I consider some over others? And man, there's just a lot to consider. And so I invite you to lean in, connect with this message the best you can, and then we have hours and hours and hours of conversations in our LGBT Saints library that we partnered with North Star a few years ago to create. And so, Leading Saints, we have a list of resources for you as a church leader, or for you as a loved one of LGBT Latter-day Saints, or as a LGBT Latter-day Saint. You will find what you need here for sure, and we welcome you in. So you're going to love this conversation. A lot to talk about, a lot to consider. Jenn Curtis, the president of North Star. All right, so Jenn, maybe where's a good starting point for you? Maybe tell us a little about your story, and that'll lead into the other points of discussion today.
Yeah, so a little bit about my story is I've been a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints my whole life, born and raised in it. And I got married back in my day. I'm almost 50 in a couple of months here. And I got married young. I was married right at 19 and got into a marriage, married to my husband. And we've been married for about 31 years, I think, this December. And I came out in the middle of that marriage.
Oh, wow.
So I experienced same-sex attraction. And at about the 18-year mark is when I started to take on this bit in my life of what is going on inside of me, what's happening with my friendships, what is happening right now.
Yeah.
And I had been dealing with so much depression and so much other stuff in my life that it took time to kind of push that stuff aside to let other stuff bubble up as happens, as we kind of clear ourselves and heal in different ways. And as I did that, it was like, when people get surprised, there's that like cannon, it's got that spring that's a snake in it, right? And you take it off and you're like, whoa, what just happened? And that's exactly what happened.
Wow.
To me. And it was like I opened the can and filling out, and I had moments in prayer with my Heavenly Father about what was going on. And the most impactful moment for me is I was starting to understand things about my sexuality and about myself. And for those out there who think that I wasn't self-aware, it's really true. I wasn't really self-aware.
Mm-hmm.
And because in the church, it's too easy to stuff things down that we think shouldn't be happening, or we shouldn't feel things and all of those. And so I did. I just shoved it all down. And when it came out like that, um, I had a prayer moment with God, and I will never forget it for 2 points. It was, I knelt down and I finally said, Heavenly Father, I think I'm gay. And I said, am I gay? Like I was asking him the question. And
Yeah.
in my head, I heard that voice and it said, what do you think? He put it back on me.
Mm.
And I said, I'm gay. And it was the first time I had really ever said that. And I broke down crying. And all of a sudden in my head, those flip books you do as a kid and you see the little guy walking and all those things. It was like he did that in my mind with my life. And all these moments that never made sense to me, all of a sudden in that context made sense. Yeah, you are. Like,
Yeah.
here it is for you. And once I had that moment, I felt free to figure out what it meant for me. And I've spent the last decade of my life figuring out what it means for choices that I want to make, and what it means for myself, and what to do with this thing in my life that I experience, or what I don't want to do with it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I am now. I've been on this journey now for a little over a decade. And how it was at the very beginning is nowhere where I am now a decade later. And I can say that what I discovered about myself is that I am all in with the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Yeah. That's
A
awesome.
100%.
That's awesome. So it sounds like early on, I mean, especially as you were like dating your husband and things, it
Hmm.
wasn't like this personal secret that you kind
No,
of just had to hold inside. But
nope.
it was there. It just maybe was
It
more
was shoved really far.
okay.
It wasn't. When I was growing up, there were a lot of different traumas and stuff that I was experiencing, and so I had a brief moment in, like, maybe my junior year of high school where I was like, "Huh, is there something about my sexuality?" But I didn't give myself the space to look at it. I just kind of shoved it to the side. And it's typical in the community, at least at my age, at 50. There are a lot more women who come out in the middle of things.
Hmm,
Um,
interesting. Yeah, I was
that
going to ask if there was maybe if this is more common with the female experience. But
it is actually, when it comes to people being married, I know quite a few married women who experience same-sex attraction, and they came out in the middle of their marriages, and I am not advocating for that. But for my story,
yeah,
and
that's
that's
your
what I
story.
can speak to, for my story, there wasn't a moment for me to really put myself in that area and really figure it out before I was married. And I really count that as a blessing at this point in my life, that for me, God was looking out for me, because he knew at some point I'd get to this point, I believe.
Hmm.
And but he allowed me to be in that marriage, and in part of being married, it took me time in my process to realize that I struggled with receiving things. And one of the things I struggled with receiving was my husband, and being married, and the family that I was able to have because of those choices. It was really hard for me to receive that
Hmm. Hmm.
and see it as the great blessing that I see it now.
Yeah. And I'm just curious, like,
Mhm,
uh, I mean, was it there's sort of this pivotal moment,
mhm.
and it wasn't something did you feel like something was off prior to that, or you just couldn't put your finger on it? Or I'm just thinking of others who may be experiencing something else. Obviously, you're not trying to
Mhm.
project your experience on
No.
them, but just so they can understand, if there is something there. I don't know.
Yeah, so what was happening for me is, yes, something was off, and I didn't understand what it was. seemed to be something off in my marriage. I wasn't connecting the way that I wanted to. And over time, I think when that happens in a marriage, that when you add time to it, it just increases whatever is kind of biting at it.
Hmm.
And as I felt that more and more, I really was on my knees and praying to Heavenly Father, what who am I think was my main question. Who am I? And I want to see myself as you see me. And that was a desperate desire. I did not count on the same sex attraction stuff bubbling up. That was not on the table at that point. But that is exactly what happened when I knelt in prayer to ask that question.
Hmm.
Who am I? And it is a part of me. I can't deny that that's a part of who I am.
So when this, you know, this part of you sort of manifests itself, whether you liked it
Yes.
or not, where did you go from there?
Oh, I went down lots of different roads, Kurt. I in the very beginning, it was like that snake that popped up out of the can. And what do you do with it? And I was startled. And what does this mean? And once I took that top off, it was as if all of that stuff that had been sitting inside of me was now coming out of the up out of me and manifesting itself. And I had almost no control about it. Think about maybe being a 14-year-old teenage boy who's like, oh my gosh, um, it had that effect. And I was in my mid 30s at the time.
Hmm.
So it was very disorienting and noticing women in a different way and feeling shame and feeling like a wolf in sheep's clothing
Hmm.
because I started to have problems going to Relief Society because I felt like now I'm in amongst this group of women and there's some part of me that's lying to them and I'm not one of them. And I don't necessarily feel like I felt that before, but now it just all of that just came on me.
Hmm.
And it's an aspect of shame. I was ashamed of how I was feeling, and I was ashamed of the thoughts that seemed like I couldn't control them when seeing an attractive woman, and thoughts would go through my head and I was like, what is happening? It was almost as if I was going through puberty for the first time
Hmm.
in this area. And as that happened, and that disorientation came along, it was, oh my gosh, what am I supposed to do about this? And that's when I started to seek out a community of people that were also Latter-day Saints to try and help to see if anyone was further down the road or understood what I was experiencing.
Yeah. So you mentioned that moment, sort of, you almost come out to yourself, right? Where you're
Yes.
suddenly self-aware of this.
Mhm.
Was there the temptation of saying, well, great, now I understand this. I don't need to share this with anybody else for the rest of my life?
Hmm. That's a good question. Did I have that experience? Mm, I had I kinda had both of them almost. There was definitely a part that was like, I'm not telling anyone in my life, but yet as I found the North Star community with fellow saints who experienced this, there was an area and going to an annual conference where I could talk about it, and talking about it made me feel better. Like um I was getting all these feelings and emotions out that I needed to process. But in my actual life, oh yeah, it was like I'm going to hide and not tell anyone. So it was
Mm.
like living a little bit of a dual existence for a while.
Yeah, that's interesting because, and that's what I appreciate so much about North Star. It sort of creates this pocket you can step into to begin
Mhm.
to de-shame the experience, right? That
Yes,
suddenly,
yes.
like, oh wait, maybe I'm not so broken. Maybe there is something more to learn here. Maybe I can talk with people, right? And it almost gives you like a forum
Mhm.
to say the words and and engage with others who have similar experiences, and then that maybe help with that next experience.
Well, and the other thing that it did to help was it as I listened to people talk about it, it gave me more of a language to articulate my own experience to people.
Mhm.
And that was super helpful because when you start to feel so many things inside your body and your mind starts having these thoughts go and go, what are you supposed to do with that? How do you talk about it? You really don't have a lot of people in the beginning of their own self-awareness don't have a vocabulary. And being around people who had been talking about it for a while, I started to pick up, oh, yes, we're having a similar experience. That was a really good metaphor over there. Or, oh, I hadn't thought about it that way. And then I could try again to articulate if I wanted to.
Yeah. Was there the feeling or the questions coming to mind early on of, does this mean my marriage ends? Does this mean I need to follow a different path? Or
Hmm. Whew, yes. So there was there were many conversations that my husband and I had as I was getting more articulate about expressing myself, and what I mean by that is in words of what this experience is like for me in the moment every day. And as we talked about it, there were a couple of moments where, like, we were laying in bed talking and I was crying and trying to say things, and he just point blankly asked me, "Do you love me?"
Hmm,
And I had to say in my response, "I don't know."
hmm,
Um, that was the worst phrase I felt I could ever say to him. And what I said it next was, "I don't know, but I'm figuring it out." I said, it's like the Titanic is laying at the bottom of the ocean and you're trying to bring up artifacts and trying to get them up and out and so we can see them. And I said, it feels like I'm raising the Titanic here. I
hmm,
haven't been looking at it. It's all been deep underwater. And as I'm raising it, I'm figuring it out. And when I know that answer, you will be the first to know, because I had to sort out so many feelings about myself and about the marriage. And am I happy? Am I not? Why is that? Why is it not? And I appreciate so much that my husband was willing to be patient with that answer.
mhm. Yeah, because I
And
mean, he's having his own experience, right? From
yes.
is how, the shame that he's feeling, or reorient himself with what is this marriage and this relationship, and right.
Mhm. And I will say, if there's any story out there that is not actually heard, it's the husbands of SSA women.
Mm.
That is the story that isn't being told, because a lot of those guys, you're gonna find this funny, Kurt, but I have done informal studies, and same-sex attracted women tend to marry engineer types.
Oh,
They're
okay.
computer engineers, they're mechanical engineers, they're electrical engineers. It's our type, and
Like maybe a little bit on the spectrum. Is that what you're getting at? Or
yes,
okay,
exactly.
okay,
And I think, oh, we could have our own discussion about why I
okay.
think that is. But with that part of it, that story just really isn't told. So from my husband's perspective and talking to him about it, he was willing to wait because in his mind, um, he's not having to compete with other men in this moment. I'm struggling about competing with women. And we had to have really odd marriage conversations. I guess they're not your typical, because we're having this conversation. Well, would you be more bothered if I left you for a man or a woman? And he's like, "Oh, a man by far." Oh, that's because it's a direct competition and it's all this comparison with him. But for a woman, well, I just kind of get it. I was
Mm.
like,
Yeah.
"Oh, well, okay." So those are the kind of conversations we ended up having. What does it mean to love each other? What does it mean to be attracted to each other? And what I started to find was, that it's more a typical marriage. you're always having conversations about yourselves and each other, and what does it mean um, for you to continue every day to choose this relationship, because my husband and I do that. And if you think that, oh, poor him about this, he's choosing this marriage every day like I am.
Yeah.
And I think that gets lost sometimes. We're
Yeah, that
both
makes sense.
choosing this.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, every marriage requires
Mhm.
choice, right? And it's
Yes.
both at the beginning and every day after that, right?
Yes.
So, yeah. So was there a moment when you came out to your husband, or was it sort of as you're I mean, do you remember a moment?
Yeah. Yeah. It wasn't very great or
Yeah.
exciting.
You
Um,
you don't get to rehearse that,
you
it's,
don't get to rehearse
unfortunate.
that, and I had told him about my at a point after being married for a little while, about my point in high school where I kind of was like, "Is there something here?" And so I used that as a bring up the topic moment. I was like, "Yeah, so, remember when I was telling you how I had that kind of year in high school when I was feeling, like maybe I'm attracted to women?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Hmm, I think that that's still a thing."
Hmm.
And he's like, "Okay." And then I forget what I moved on to. It was like that was my broach, the topic.
Yeah, yeah.
And then as I became more and more self aware, it was, "Hun, I need to get a community here. This is real." And as I started to attend the North Star annual conferences, I needed his support for that because it's financially getting up to Utah because they held them um, at in the beginning in Provo, so it was getting from California to Provo and a hotel, and I mean it's not cheap to do it for a weekend. And the more I learned that I could talk about it, when I came back home, I talked about it more.
Hmm.
And so with us, it became a gradual over time, bits, little tiny line upon line conversations about um, what it meant afterwards as I really was fully out. And that's really at those times when we started to have those hard conversations because I didn't know what it meant for my marriage for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. So, did you find North Star early on then, it sounds like? Even maybe before you came out to anybody else?
No, I actually found them out afterwards. So I came out to myself in about 2011, and the first North Star conference was 2014. It was actually at the end of 2011, so 2011, 2012. So it was about 2 years before I found North Star, and it really was just me realizing that I needed a community. It took me a while to realize, oh, I can't just talk to my husband about this. I need to talk to other people who experience this. Are
Mhm.
there other people who experience this? And if so, what are their stories? And that's when I found the Voices of Hope book that talks about a bunch of stories in there. North Star for a while had their Voices of Hope project where people did videos and you could watch about a 45-minute video of someone telling their story. And I found those and I found them to be extremely helpful. And because I was searching all over the internet for where to go for what I needed. I needed one, there to be an environment that was um, Latter-day Saint. And because those teachings are very specific here, um, to being like, what are my choices and what is it I want? And what do I think God wants for the plan of happiness? And two, I needed to believe that it was going to be encouraging to me to keep my covenants because I was sealed to my husband in the temple. And I needed an environment where I felt like I was open to talk about both of those, what it meant religiously for me and what it meant for my sexuality as I was talking about it and opening up.
Yeah. I love that part of your story, just seeing it's very clear of how that North Star community was beneficial in your journey. And maybe
Mhm.
speak to that, like, because It's interesting as I've attended North Star over the years, their annual conference, and
Mhm,
I hear from attendees who are now maybe teaching a class or now they're on this board or that committee
mhm.
or whatever, and to hear their first experience with North Star, it was like, I mean, it was a stressful event to just get out of the car, walk into
Yes,
that conference,
yes,
center, right? And to me, I'm
yes.
like, "I'm just here to check it out,"
Yeah.
like, and so I'm like, "Wow,
It's
that's
stressful.
interesting," and then because there's that wall of shame, right?
Yes, that
That's
you're walking into, and when I
yeah.
went to my first conference, I literally knew no one.
Mhm.
There had been some, like, email, um, servers, where people could sign up with their email and kind of talk to each other a little bit. I didn't even know about that. I just found the conference, was happening, and I actually only chose, like, 3 days beforehand to go. It was one of those moments where I kinda was thinking about it, and I woke up one morning, and the spirit was like, "You need to go to that conference." And I looked over at my husband and was like, I've been telling you there's a conference. I think I need to go." And I went by myself, and it was scary. Um, I hadn't been up to Utah for quite some time since we had been up there for school. And going in those doors and putting a name badge on, I had no idea what I was about to experience. But I knew that I would be around people from what I could gather from the website, that I'd be around people who were in this same kind of having those same three conditions. And that is when I met quite a few people who are still my friends a decade plus later.
Mm. Yeah. Any advice for somebody who's maybe apprehensive to go or to make it their first one?
Um, ooh, if anyone's apprehensive to go, still go.
Yeah,
There's
just
you
push through.
walk in the thing that you'll experience, and this is what a lot of people say, is that once you walk through those doors, you might have this wall of shame and not knowing fully what decisions you're going to make in life, but once you walk through those doors, it's like you also hit a wall of love, and you feel the Holy Ghost there, and you feel this love. And then someone usually will ask you, "Oh, hi, nice to meet you. What brings you to North Star?" And that's our simple way of saying, "Are you here for yourself? Are you here for a child? Are you here because of your brother? What brings you here?" And you can say whatever you want.
Yeah.
I'm just looking for connection. Well, then we've let's make a connection.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. And again, you don't have to there's this feeling of like that you're coming out to this community to some degree, but you can just say, "Oh, what brings you here? Oh, I heard this
Yep.
Leading Saints podcast. Oh,
Yes.
cool."
And we're like,
That's
cool,
yeah,
glad to have you. Kurt's a
right.
great guy.
And I think it's good that you mentioned it. Like these are conferences that when I attend the North Star conference, I meet various like sets of parents who
Yep.
their LGBT child is not there, but they're there
Correct.
because there's great resources for parents or
Mhm.
family or
Yep.
regardless if you don't need to bring your LGBT loved one to get
No.
in, right?
No, you do
So
not. You all you have to do is go to, the website, purchase a ticket. No, we'll ask information just for understanding, but other than that, we're just happy that you've come
yeah,
to be a part of a community who deeply, deeply is working out these issues with the intersection of their faith and their sexuality
yeah.
or gender identity issues.
Yeah. Obviously, I'm so grateful that North Star exists. However, like in general, I would hope that church was that type of place, right? I mean, that where church is a place that we recognize our weaknesses, our life experiences,
Yep.
the shame that we have, but unfortunately, that just is not that type of place. But is there
Yes.
anything church leaders could do or understand to help LGBT individuals have the courage to walk into church, sit down, feel a part of it, and connect.
That is a very big question, Kurt. Um, because I wish there was no need for North Star. I
Mhm.
really do. I wish that all of that connection and all of that understanding could be had in a ward. And yet the reality is a lot of the people that come to a conference or come into our Facebook groups don't necessarily feel that. And the best thing I think people can do is what Christ did. He always sat and he took a moment to be connected to that individual. Even the woman um, caught in adultery, right? There was a moment of talking to her. It was brief, it was just this moment, but it had a profound impact on her. And sometimes I think, as members of the church, understanding that when a person comes out, you need to be curious. Curiosity, I have found, is the antidote for fear. So if you're afraid that someone in your ward is um, LGBT or talking about it or making choices that you're like, whoa, 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 that isn't what the church believes about it. Continue to just be curious because they're going through a process, and where they are right in that moment doesn't mean that they're going to stay there. It just means that that's where they are right now.
Yeah.
And just ask questions, because I didn't know for a long time that some of the women in my ward, because eventually I did come out to my ward and Relief Society. I didn't know until years, like we're talking just a couple of years ago, that they thought, one of them thought like that meant that I had been involved in a same sex sexual relationship.
Hmm.
And I was like, is that what you took away from me saying that I experienced same-sex attraction? Because that is not the case. That is not what I was trying to tell you. What I was trying to tell you is I am struggling right now.
Yeah.
I'm struggling in my faith, and I'm struggling to understand what this means for me, my marriage, my family. I just need some soft landing places where if I want to talk about it and I'm going out to lunch, that I have the feel the freedom to talk about it. And
Yeah.
that you'll listen. I'm not asking for advice. Unless I say I'd like to have your insight, but having those listening ears and just a little bit of openness. And I don't mind questions. Ask me all the questions you want, because sometimes it was people's questions that helped me process and go, "Oh, that was a good question. I'm gonna have to come up with the answer to that." And it took me down a road a little bit further in processing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. And you know, this concept of, as leaders, we're just hungry for the,
Mm.
give me the 5 steps, Jen. Like, what do we say? Like, what should I write on the card that I keep in my pocket, that I pull out and say, "Okay, I know what to do here," right? And this is the tough thing about just leading saints in general, is as we strive to improve as leaders, we
Yep.
often focus on, what are the do's? What do I need to say or
Mhm,
do? Or
mhm,
um, when in reality, it's more about, who do I need to be, right? Because if,
mm,
and this is going to feel like a shameless plug for North Star, but there's something about when you go to the North Star conference. Yes, you'll take a notebook, and
mm,
you'll be given a notebook, and you will learn stuff. You will learn the
mhm,
even 5 steps of whatever, and you'll write these things down. You'll have a better understanding what to do. But the more important impact is what you're becoming. There's this transformational experience when you're in the room, when you're hugging certain people, right? Again, I always thank the North Star, the community, for teaching me how to hug. Uh,
yep,
and again, you're not like required to hug, but that may sneak up on you. I'm just saying. But suddenly, being the quote unquote sexual minority in the room as a
mhm,
heterosexual man, it there's a shift that happens. And then you sit down at a lunch table and you hear people discuss these things, and then suddenly you're like, you're just in it, in that in that container, that by the time you leave that conference, you're like, I'm a different person. Like, I know how to show up to church a little bit differently, not because I was given or told what to do, but because I've had a transformational experience here, and now I
Mm.
get it a little bit more, right? And so it's a bit nuanced, but that's been my experience.
Well, I think that's a beautiful experience to have.
Yeah.
Um, and I think for me, when I've sat down and talked to parents, because I experienced this and they have younger kids who are just in that coming out stage of being in their late teens, early 20s. I love to sit down and talk with them because I have the words maybe to articulate this experience of what might be happening when their own child still hasn't necessarily figured all of it out. And so for me, I have that little bit of transformation of going, oh my gosh, sitting down with parents and thinking about being in my ward and knowing that are there parents here who are struggling with these things and they don't know what to say? Their kid is struggling to articulate it all, except for what they've been hearing at school or on the internet. And I've been touched by how parents have talked about it.
Mhm.
And I think I become a better person still at a conference for hearing some of these stories and understanding because I haven't necessarily had truly negative experiences with leadership. I've had some neutral ones and I've had some great ones. It's kind of been a little bit mixed there, but I haven't had truly bad experiences. But I hear those and it helps me understand there are people who do feel hurt because when they went into the bishop's office, he had preconceived assumptions about what it meant when that person said, I'm LGBT, I'm gay, I experience same sex attraction, any version of that. And those preconceived assumptions, I think that's what can get in the way sometimes. And sometimes you might not even know you have them, but trying to be just aware that you might, if you ask more questions, what does that mean for that person? What are you trying to tell me? Can you expand upon that? Can be helpful.
That's awesome. And this feeds into some questions Jared's asking. Is I think
Mhm.
this and it'll kind of help answer a few other questions I
Yeah.
have. But in a world of 2025, conference in 2026, there are so many
Yeah.
resources out there, so many podcasts, so many
Yep.
social media channels,
Mhm.
so many conferences now, right? And
Mhm.
I'd say isn't that beautiful that we have all
Yeah.
these resources that
Yep.
somebody doesn't have to sit alone and wonder, I'm the only person in the world that experiences this, and there's something wrong with me, right? So,
Right.
how would you say how's North Star different than maybe some other resources out there?
So I would say that North Star is different in that the language that you'll hear on our website and in content that we put out there is going to be we're here to bring everyone in. Everyone is welcome, just like the church's signs, all visitors welcome. And the language you're going to hear is very Latter-day Saint in that we are here as a group of people striving to keep our covenants. I found that my covenants were what helped ground me. And though at points it felt like I might be slipping from them or thinking about my choices away from them because I had to really think through all of it about what I wanted and who I wanted to be. Um, the language is that this is a gospel centered approach. We talk about Jesus Christ and the atonement and that it works for every situation. Even if you don't think it works for the LGBT, I'm going to say you're wrong. It does. It is a universal principle. And that we're striving to keep our covenants. A lot of other places will say that they're faith affirming, but the path of keeping your covenant part gets lost or not put forward as much. Where that is the place that we sit. Does that mean that everyone at North Star has been obedient and has always kept their covenants and not gone down any paths. No. In fact, I've gotten to know a lot of people at North Star over a decade. And there's only been mine and two other stories that I'm aware of that we have never actually in any way acted on our same sex attraction. Everyone else has gone off and explored and done things anywhere from holding same sex hands to kissing to being in full on relationships, living together, coming back to the church a couple of times until now they're fine, staying single, going on to be married. I've heard it all. But if you think that us saying strive to keep your covenants means that we're perfect, we are not. It's that word striving. We're striving to reconcile these two things that to most people seem that you can't reconcile it because the gospel, the plan of happiness to a lot of people does not seem to fit my demographic. It just doesn't seem the plan that you move along and keep making covenants till you can be sealed in the temple to in a heterosexual marriage and then one day become kings and queens in the celestial kingdom if you live your life and make great choices. That plan does not seem to fit my demographic of same-sex attraction and gender identity. And yet, we are all striving for that. We do not say be in a mixed orientation marriage, which is what it gets called out there. I don't like that term because I'm in a marriage. And that is what makes North Star different because that is always the goal, is to make and keep sacred covenants and move forward on that path and find that place of peace and reconciliation with Christ.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really well said. And when people ask me, like, as far as like some of these independent organizations, like Leading Saints is an independent
Uh-huh.
organization
Yep.
from the church. We're an independent advocate of the church,
Yep.
just like North Star.
Yep.
And the place that I've gone as executive director of Leading Saints to confirm that North Star is the only LGBT organization that we endorse in the Latter-day Saint experience. So that the reason the pathway I get there is I ask myself, which organization is most willing to stand in the tension of
Mm-hmm.
some of these life experiences, right?
Mm-hmm.
And North Star and I would say North Star has made incredible attempts to do that. Or has North Star always been perfect at it? No, and nobody in
No,
North Star would claim that
no.
because it is so difficult to sort of navigate those waters and say, we're
Mm-hmm.
going to talk about this life experience that is very real, it being
Mm-hmm.
LGBT and the social dynamics that come with that. And we're going to talk about the redeeming power of Christ, his covenant path, prophets,
Mm-hmm.
commandments, right? And so if ever I find an organization, and this is even outside of LGBT topics,
Mm-hmm.
if I find an organization that's not willing to go into those tension points, they almost have to like ignore some of these things in order to, you know, gather people. That's where
Mm-hmm.
I get very curious. Where I'm thinking, like maybe there's more here that we could discover and reconcile if we're willing to stand those tension points. So to me, that's where that's where I found the most power in North Star. And it's tricky because those tension points are often uncomfortable. And it's sometimes like,
Oh, they are.
this being at this conference and we're in these tension points, like, I'd much rather go to another conference where maybe I don't have to sit in this because it's so uncomfortable, right? But it is so redemptive as well to recognize that Jesus Christ is the answer. Like he has
Mm-hmm.
invited us in covenant relationship, and there's something to those covenant relationships where all of us, regardless of our sexual orientation or life
Mm-hmm.
experience, he invites all to come to that tension point and to find him and be reconciled through Christ. So anyways, it's been tricky at times, but that's what I'm looking for when it comes to independent organizations that aren't the church, right?
Right. No, and I think that's fantastic. And I would say, yes, North Star has decided to tackle that tension filled space
Mm-hmm.
because we have people who are having lots of different experiences, and as we're looking at the doctrines of the church, it's about us, and this isn't just the LGBT world, it's everyone. It's about aligning yourself with God and his plan. That's hard for everyone to do.
Yeah.
Um, but in this particular place, a lot of people, that a lot of more tension ends up coming into that place because they're like, well, the plan of happiness does not seem to fit for you guys. Like,
Right.
your natural inclination is to be with the same sex partner. What do you do about that? Oh, I lived in tension for almost a decade of my life. That's what I've done. Until I could release that and realize I want to be in alignment with God. This is what he has stated. I can choose what I want to do with that. And there was a power that I felt I got in understanding that I had a choice in this. It's not just whatever is happening inside my body, what's happening inside my mind. I get to actually choose what I want to do. And it feels like for a lot of people, for because I've heard their stories, that they don't have a choice. And using the power from having my making my covenants in the temple and with my husband, that actually is what saved me in my journey, because I I fully know that this is the path that is to help me have the most happiness, not just now, but in the world to come. But then I like to say, but not just in the world to come, but for now as well. It actually has brought me happiness. I get to be a mother and a wife, and I get to figure out what that means for me. And I get to make my choices daily, what the same sex attraction part means or doesn't mean in my life. And I will say, being married for a little over 30 years, the same sex attraction has not affected an intimate part of my life as much as people would like to imagine it does. Instead, having been molested as a kid has
Mm.
more effect on that part of my life than anything else.
Mm. Wow. Wow. What would you say to someone, Jen, who said, Listen, like, I'm listening to Kurt and Jen talk here, but I've been to the Star Conference, or I
Yeah.
had a friend that goes and it
Mhm,
was a negative experience. They say all
yep,
are welcome, but it's really not true.
mhm.
They're passively keeping people out. I mean, what would you say to someone who's maybe had a negative experience?
Oh, yeah, do the hard-hitting questions. Um, for a person who's had a negative experience, I'd I'd like to understand what that a negative experience has been, because I would like that not to be repeated if we can.
Yeah.
But what I have found a lot is that people who come in sometimes and have a negative experience, could it be a little bit on us? Maybe. But at the same time, it could also be a little bit on them, where they are and how they're thinking about it. Because when you come into a conference, and if you think that we're North Star is going to be full of rainbows and butterflies, and we're talking about same-sex dating and what to do when you want to get to, how do you talk to your parents about wanting to get married to your same-sex partner or anything in that realm, we are not talking about that. We are talking about Christ, and we're telling personal stories about how we have worked through to some reconciliation in our lives, what really did help, what aspects of the gospel are holding on to covenants. And I would say, just think about yourself in this situation. Where are you sitting? Because maybe it felt uncomfortable because you are, uh, and I don't want to mince words here. Maybe it's because you are you are really wanting all of those things, and we were saying, hey, we'd love to help encourage you to keep your covenants. It's hard to sit in that when you're thinking, oh my gosh, I came here for this and this is not what I was wanting. I wanted that LGBT world faith affirming and pride movement space. I'm going to let you know, North Star is not that pride movement space. Yet all are welcome, because we know everyone is in a different place, and everyone who's been in leadership, I can pretty much guarantee, has been in those deep dark holes at 2 a.m. in the morning trying to figure out what do they do next, because they're not sure if they can continue sitting in a tension filled place, because that's where we find ourselves until we hit that reconciliation point and some of that tension lessens for us. I'm going to say it could be on both parts. And if anyone's had a negative experience, I'll be real. Presidents at northstarsaints.org. I get those emails. Let me know, and I'm literally open to hearing what people might have to say. But I would say, hey, this is a two-way street.
Yeah. Yeah, you see, again, that's a perfect example of like, ooh, like I feel the tension in that. However, like to me, that's where sanctification is happening, right? Where
Mhm.
we're not going to a place to necessarily hear everything we want to hear, but like, wow, that's a I didn't really like that last speaker, and I don't know if I agree with them, but I'm willing to sit with it, right, and lean in, and to me, I've just encouraged people, like, if you've had a negative experience with North Star, give us another chance, right? Like,
Yeah.
imagine if someone said, "Oh, I met a gay person once, it was not a good experience, so I just avoid them
Okay.
altogether." Like, no,
Right.
like, give them another
Yeah.
chance, right? Like,
Give them
there's
another
goodness
chance.
here. Yeah, and so lean in, and I get that, and part of what you say, it's not that, I meant there are people on their journey, they may not be ready for that
Mhm.
North Star conference or for that North Star community,
Correct.
but just know it's there, and we're all there when they're ready, right?
Yeah, and I can give us a quick example. We were having what we call a closed door session, where people, like only the same sex attracted women, go into the session to kind of be very specific, and it's no one else is able to come in there. And we were having that session, and one of the ladies in there asked a question about same-sex dating, and that's the way she was going, and people gave their insight that have been down that road, and the next thing we know, she's like, this isn't what I believe I thought it was going to be, and she just got up and she just left the entire conference
Mm,
in the middle of it. And we all were like, what's happening right now? And that's, I think, really one of the first moments that I was like, oh, she was not she didn't understand fully what we were going to be talking about, or what we were going to be um, doing here,
yeah,
and or the way we were going to be talking about it. And but what happened is two ladies immediately stood up and went out that door after her to talk to her, because she obviously was struggling, and there was no reason for us not to continue to reach out, whether this was the right space that she wanted to be in or not. We're still here to say, what is it then that you need? And maybe this isn't the right place, but I have friends in lots of other organizations, and I am happy to introduce you, um, that might be a better fit, and that's fine. That's totally fine. But if you are an all into the gospel and you're experiencing same sex attraction, uh, and you're working at striving to keep those covenants, then I would welcome you to come to one of our conferences and try us out and see if all the things we put on our website, and all the ways we say it, um, that we are working hard as our individual selves to live up to that, and to um, try and help in the ways that we have found have been lasting, where that tension isn't just snapped and broken to make decisions. Instead, that tension's just relieved. And now I can feel like I can be more loose and operate better in this world. Doesn't mean that it's gone, or that God has taken the same sex attraction from me. That's not happened. But what has happened is I've focused on other things, and that tension has lessened, and I feel like I can make lots of choices in this life.
yeah. And I just wanna, reiterate, like, because we both use the word tension a lot. This isn't a
Yeah.
tense conference. I'm just
No.
saying generally, right? Like, people will come and it's fun. There's
Yes.
so many
Thanks
nice
for
people, so
yes,
many hugs, so much love, like,
yes.
so You don't want to scare you
It's
away.
the internal tension that we're
Yes, yes,
talking about that people
exactly.
tend to feel as they're coming. They feel the apprehension. They feel that
Yeah,
they don't know what choice they wanna make in life. They're flirting with, trying the same-sex dating. Maybe that will help, relieve some of this tension that they're feeling about these two bits. It's putting a rubber band between them, and at a point it feels like it's really stretched far. And I'm saying that as I've leaned in, that's where the tension lessens. I've leaned into understanding more about my same-sex attraction, and I've also leaned into the Savior and my covenants, and the tension lessens.
yeah, yeah, for
it
sure.
it seems a natural outcome to me.
Yeah, for sure, and really put that "come as you are" to the test. Like, come
Yeah.
join us, and we will welcome you, and you'll
Yes.
find me there, and come and
You'll
say
find me.
you can tell me if I was wrong or not. But
Yeah.
yep. So really good stuff. Well, and again, we don't. There's so much to talk about, and I want to highlight here. Like, there's so many questions to consider to go through. We
Mhm.
have a full library called LGBT Saints
Mm.
in the In Zion Lab that we partnered with North Star several years
Mhm.
ago to put together. And so
Mhm.
please know we literally have like 25 plus hours discussing various dynamics and questions and thoughts and things. We just hope you feel. I definitely want leaders to understand there are valid resources out there that you can be confident as a church leader to recommend, even though they're not necessarily under the church umbrella, right? They're
Right.
even though they're separated, independent from the church, I should say. So, and North Star definitely is that kind of organization. So,
And can I put a plug in really quick
yeah,
here, Kirk, as well? We have been redoing our website for the past year, and we have a lot more content on there so that if you're looking to understand same-sex attraction a little from a men's perspective, there's a whole section that you can find that have links to keynote speakers that have really touched that community, and blog posts and different things, and just content of frequently asked questions. You can find it for same-sex attracted women. We are continuing to get more of that content moved over and updated. And we will be doing a church leader, revamping the church leader section. And our written content group is going to be working at putting together some Fifth Sundays, some firesides, some things that church leaders can click on if if they are interested in a conversation about being all in the gospel of Jesus Christ and navigating these issues. So our website is getting lots more content, and we have an archive and our own resource library that has a lot of hours as well. So between the two of us, Kurt, like
yeah,
we have so many. Almost every conference we've done, and this will be our 13th one in 2026 in February. Uh, Almost every one of them has either audio or video been taped any session. So you should be able to find hours and hours. I
yeah,
think we did normally like 36 sessions. So every conference has almost 40 hours of information. So there's a lot out there to find.
yeah. And I'll up the ante here. I want to share my screen, and I will show. Let's see here. Show the website. Because I want to give some really solid practical advice, especially to church
Mhm.
leaders.
Yeah.
Like, say somebody, you're a bishop, release site president, someone meets with you and shares this part of themselves, and they're
Hmm.
like, what do you say? Like, to me, the
Hmm.
most powerful thing you say, oh, I've got resources. Like,
Yes.
let me forward you to go check out North Star, and because you don't have to wait for this conference every year.
No,
It's like, oh
you do
no,
not.
it's March and the conference is in February. What am I gonna do? Right?
Right.
You can come here. This is so powerful. Like, let's say it's same-sex attracted men. You come
Hmm.
here. They have these phenomenal online communities. You click
Yep.
here, you fill out a few questions, and then I think there are a lot of them are hosted on
Facebook.
Facebook, but they don't.
Hmm.
But you don't just willy nilly let anybody in there.
No,
They
we have
they
a
vet
whole
everybody.
vetting
Yeah.
process. Yes.
So you can be confident that you're going in there and it's people with your similar experience, and you can start asking questions, see what other discussions are going on. So it's really
Hmm.
powerful that way to immediately get somebody in a community online
Hmm.
where they know that it's a faith affirming, faith promoting experience. and they're going to be connected with others who are maybe further along in their journey. And so
Mhm. Yeah, and
definitely come check this out.
if you scroll down there, you'll see we have kind of the popular ones there and voices from the community. There's a lot stories from people, sessions at conferences that come up in a search engine, so you can see lots and lots more, and our wonderful frequently asked question page.
Yeah. And of course, for this audience, I'll highlight when you come to, is it in here, church leaders, right? So
Yeah,
this is
this
a
is the one
great
that's
place to
gonna
start.
be completely revamped.
Cool.
So this one is not what it's going to be. It's going to look like the others, and that is a top priority for me as the president of North Star to get this one where we want it to be, so that if you have a question, the frequently asked ones can be right there. And if I was to say anything to be there when it comes to church leaders, the people who went into bishop's office, I have a friend, she went into the bishop's office, started talking about the same sex attraction, and he's like, okay, I hear you on that. He was very loving. But then he started asking her questions about God and how she thought about him. And all of the sessions when she started going to his office, it had nothing to do about the same sex attraction. It was about what she thought about herself and God and that relationship. And as he worked with her for like 8, 9 months, at the end of it, um, he's like, so what do you think now? And she's like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, we haven't really been talking about the same sex attraction. He goes, but from all the answers you've given me, I think you know what you want to do. And that's where he left it.
Wow, that's great.
And that to me is in this space of what I want to help bishops see, is that it's not talking about necessarily not just bishops, but Relief Society presents everyone. That it's sitting there, and as we grapple with that space of our faith and sexuality, that as we tackle the spiritual side of it, what is it that we want? What do we want? What do we believe God wants for us? Um, Once we get those questions answered, what to do about the same sex attraction or gender identity issues sorts itself out.
Yeah, it's powerful. Really good stuff. Well, again, there's so much more, Jen, we
Yes,
could talk
there is.
about. I
There is.
Is there anybody in the recording here? Maybe you can type in a question or raise your hand if you want to unmute and speak up. But in Jen, while they think of that
Mhm.
and consider the questions they want to ask,
Yeah.
give us the final plug here for the conference coming up in February.
Yeah. So the final plug is this year and moving forward, we're calling our conference Inspire, because we find that this is a place for people to come and be inspired and feel the spirit and uh, feel inspired of what to do next in their step of process. And we're really excited about it being up at the Ogden Eccles Center. It's a beautiful facility, and we know that as people sign up, or if you're even thinking about signing up, do it. Come and be with saints, whether you experience same sex attraction or you don't. You're a parent. Every family has some connection. Every family out there in the LDS church has some connection, whether you know it or not. And if you feel this prick in your heart, maybe act on it, because I know that people have come into a conference and gone away and made their wards and stakes better just because they learned something.
Yeah.
And that's what we're wanting. We're wanting more people to have this experience of being with us as saints, because we want this to go forward. And I really do have a goal of putting myself out of a job as president. I would like wards to take on this function fully, and we're here just to kind of be that in between for now. And I want all the saints to just understand that you can talk about these issues, and that there really are all in members of the church who are doing this. But guess what? We're kind of quiet about it. And we're not sure how people are going to take that, because I've gotten flack on both sides. Members of the church um, who think, I should divorce my husband and let him be free, and people not getting it. And I've had people in the LGBT world who are like, I can't believe you'd be a part of that church. Um, but if you want to find those people, you're going to find them most likely at a North Star conference. So come and fellowship with us.
Love it. Love it. All right. Any questions anybody has? You can just raise your hand. How about this one? Do you feel there's? I mean, I guess you're getting after this, is what you just said. Do you feel there's need to be more? Is there a need to be more discussion on LGBT issues on a church level?
Mm. I think that there does, because we hear all the time that there are still like stake presidents who are like, we shouldn't talk about this at all because somehow it really isn't happening in their stake. Oh, we don't have anyone like that in our stake. Really? The
Mhm.
statistics would say that there's probably at least 3 to 4 in every award.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I think it does need to be talked about. But I think that what's happening is a lot of people don't know how to talk about it, or are afraid to talk about it because they're afraid to offend someone. And when you talk to me, I will say there's no question that can offend me. And I would hope and pray that more members who experience this could be at that could be in that place, that it won't offend them. I would rather you curious and talking to me than you making some assumptions that are wildly inaccurate.
Yeah.
So the church does need to help, I think. Need to help a little bit, maybe more in helping them and helping the leadership understand that it's okay to talk about this.
Yeah. And I would say, I mean, obviously with church, we're talking specifically about
Right.
church, we want to keep focus on Christ, which this
Correct.
obviously um can be a part of that. But to me, it's more of like the leader's role or the ward's role is to create that community, right? That
Yep.
hopefully can replace North Star in the long run.
Yep.
But also, to me, the most powerful thing you can do to drive the hope train as a leader to be like, I have lists of resources about that topic. Like, come see me or
Mhm.
send me a text. I'd be love. And then you're sending North Star links and groups and conference
Mhm.
agendas and videos and
Mhm.
voices of hope messages. So
Mhm.
there are to just communicate to members, like, your role isn't necessarily to figure out how to facilitate that conversation about these really tough issues or tension filled issues, but to say, I have resources and I can help, and they'll love you for it.
The R word,
Yep.
resources.
Resources.
Actual resources where
Yeah.
people who have figured out how to talk about these things can share their experience.
Yeah.
I like that.
Uh, so true. So true. All right. Well, again, I think we've articulated just the North Star community, the power it
Yep.
is for individuals. Any final encouragement, Jen, you'd have for church leaders?
Mm. The final encouragement for church leaders is the world the world is getting its hooks in on this topic. And it's creating an environment where people immediately believe that um, maybe putting that rainbow pin on your lapel, uh, saying that you're a safe person, is the right thing to do because you're affirming and you're encouraging and all of that. Um, and I will say that as an all in person, um, that would maybe make me nervous. That I'm going to sit in your office and you're going to talk to me about things that aren't necessarily, I'm staying on this covenant path. This is what I'm doing. It would make me nervous. So I would just say to leaders out there, think through these things and be willing to have those two-way conversations and be willing to learn. Um, and understand what resources are available. I don't expect every bishop or stake president to be have his doctorate in this, right? I don't expect that. But I like what you said of having that R word, that resources. There are resources, there are places you go that I believe are safe. And as North Star is an independent advocate organization in the church or with the church, it took us over a decade-ish to get that status, to have the church feel that we are a safe place. And we honor that we created that we're okay having these conversations and saying at the same time, I'm same sex, I experience same sex attraction, and I'm all in with the gospel of Jesus Christ. I don't know what that means for me or how I'm going to sort my feelings. And that's okay. But there are resources out there for you. And North Star is continuing to try and create what we can to help more church leaders down this road. But I know from my own experience that when I went into a bishop's office, the first bishop the second bishop that I talked to about this, when he's across the desk from me, and he said, I don't think you know that I have a sister who's gay. She's not active. She's been married to a woman and they adopted children together and stuff like that. And he goes, would it be okay if I talk to my sister for a moment about this? And I said, I would love, sure, like the more, the better. And when he came back to me the next week, there was a change. And he looked at me with tear-filled eyes and said, I talked to her. And it's the first time that we've really talked about it in a gospel sense. That helped that relationship. It helped me connect with him more, that he was willing to do a simple thing as call his sister. We had lots of conversations about the gospel and stuff like that. I saw him every week for a year as I sorted through the hardest parts of it. But that moment is what connected me to him. And it seemed simple. And it's always the simple things. And if he had been able to say there are a ton of resources I know about, it would have made my life even easier to connect to a community to really help.